Welcome to Careers in Discovery, your window into the world of leaders in pharma and biotech. Brought to you by Singular Talent, making hiring better for organizations involved in drug discovery and R&D. Yaniv Erlich is the CEO of 11 Therapeutics, a global biotech startup turning RNA drug development into a programmable process. Yaniv talked to us about his journey from academia to the military and into biotech, meeting Bill Gates, and the importance of maintaining your optimism. On this week's episode of Careers in Discovery, I am delighted to be joined by Yaniv Erlich of 11 Therapeutics. Yaniv, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Tom. Pleasure to be here.
Fantastic to see you. Yaniv, I always start by talking about what you're doing now, and I'm fascinated by the work you're doing at 11 Therapeutics. Tell me all about making RNA drug development programmable.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. The idea is that RNA and DNA molecules are digital molecules. They consist of building blocks that are discrete, the nucleotides, right? So you can basically, by put the right order of these building blocks of these nucleotides, you can create many different types of drugs. So it's like basically like building a file in a way that you need to put the right kind of like symbols and to represent what you want to do. And that's kind of like in the very basic level of understanding the promise of RNA therapeutics.
I see. Okay, that's really interesting. So essentially you're looking at it as a exceedingly complex, I imagine, piece of software.
It is. It's like basically like building a code, right? Let's think about, an mRNA. So in an mRNA, this is the molecule that basically you can get proteins out of it. And in a moment, we'll explain what you can do with an mRNA, what proteins. But the mRNA itself, it builds from there are discrete regions in this molecule. There is like a header telling basically the ribosome, this is the machinery that reads the mRNA and make a protein. It tells the ribosome, hey, come here. Here is the header. And now go through this header and start translating now. And there is kind of like a moment that there is like a codon that says, from here, you start here. And then there is a genetic code. And the ribosome reads this basically this mRNA molecule and follow the recipe, produces the protein that we want. And then there is another code that says, stop here. That's it. And after this stop position, there is another kind of like a suffix. And the suffix tells the cell, in a way, for how long we should retain this mRNA. Should it be like for a long time, for a short time, and so on. So it's really like building a code, in a way. And so we talked about proteins. Proteins are basically the machinery that we have in cells.
Yes.
And this machinery can be, for instance, in the case of the mRNA vaccines, we can create the spike protein, and the cells will present the spike protein to the immune cells. And the immune cell will say, so that's a protein, a foreign protein. Let's develop antibodies against this foreign protein.
Yes.
And this way you acquire immunogenetic memory about this spike protein before seeing the virus, hopefully. Or you can create, in some cases where people have, let's say, a loss of an enzyme in their body. So they suffer from a metabolic disease. They cannot process a specific type of metabolite, which can create, in some cases, some severe disruptions of some organs where this metabolite accumulates. For instance, in the case of Tay-Sachs, which is a rare genetic disease, the hope is that you can correct this metabolism error by telling the body, here are the instructions of how to make this protein, this enzyme to produce the metabolite, and then the body can produce it. So it's a very different approach when we think about most drugs. Most drugs are small molecules. They're almost like, think about it as like darts that we throw, and you kind of like try to punch like a specific something in the body, right? Like a specific, let's try to reduce the rate of a specific metabolistic process. So we just throw this dart. Hopefully we just hit this process. we don't try to create something new, and we don't try to kind of like put it as a software, as a code that we give to the body. That's the beauty. That's, for me, as a computer scientist, the beauty of these programmable molecules.
Yeah, I see. So you're essentially just using what's already there, rather than trying to introduce something new. You're using what's already there, but perhaps going and fixing the bugs and recorrecting the underlying code.
It's like injecting a new patch of code into your body. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's, similar concepts I've heard a little bit more recently over the last couple of years, and it's still, fairly under the surface, but it's a conceptual leap, isn't it, in how you think about treating disease. And then I suppose that opens up a lot of possibilities if you go from, well, how do we interact with this system that's already there, and how do we affect this system that's already there, to, no, the system works, it just sometimes goes wrong, like any system does, and we need to go in and correct it.
In many types of illnesses, right, it's like 1-2 things that sometimes they just go like you need to kind of like tweak them. At the end, right, you have 20,000 genes in your body to like, and most of them are like, some of them are quite essential, like you cannot live without them, but you're living, you're okay, but you suffer from one sort of issue, and we need to see like how to mitigate this. Yeah, so this is kind of like the beauty of this approach.
Yes, it's very interesting. And then so tell me a bit about, I imagine you could apply the concept of this to lots of different diseases and lots of different areas of biology, not just diseases, I suppose. So where are you focusing? What's the concentration for 11?
Yeah. So one issue with this approach is that these molecules, right, your body basically hates to get a foreign mRNA molecules. Your body thinks it's a virus. So there are many types of mechanisms in your body to first trying to evade, like receiving these molecules. And if these molecules were received, actually not to allow the translation of this foreign code, which is like a virus, and also to degrade them as fast as possible. Now, viruses develop their own set of tools how to evade all these things. It's kind of like an arm race between the virus and your body. We cannot harness what viruses do, because as part of their tools, they actually also harm the body, right? They do some things that we cannot tolerate as a drug. So we need to be much smarter than that. But one thing that it's quite known now in the field of RNA therapeutics is that you can introduce chemical modifications to these RNA molecules. And these chemical modifications, you can think about them as a camouflage. It's like basically putting like some uniforms, that the same way that soldiers put uniforms.
Yes.
And this kind of like ability to camouflage the molecule means that the enzymes that are responsible to degrade the molecule and to break it up quickly, they look at these molecules and they say, I don't think it's an mRNA. Maybe I should not touch it. But yet the molecule, the ribosome, which is the molecule to read this and to translate it to protein, will think that this is actually a regular mRNA. And so kind of like it's to making sure that we are not being seen by the enzymes that degrade. Or if they try to degrade, we can also put like an armor that will not allow them to chop this molecule. And for the ribosome that reads this molecule to say everything is fine, just keep doing whatever you're doing. So it's a very interesting approach, and this is what we're working on in 11, to think about kind of like this chemistry that will allow us to not do one thing, but actually keep retaining other properties of the molecule. And to do that, we need a lot of data, right? We need to kind of like understand different types of chemistries, understand these different types of modifications, like where we put the armor exactly. The armor has some cost, right? It's like you cannot put it on everywhere in the molecule.
Yes.
So to do that, we developed a platform that allow us to generate a massive amount of data and to apply AI tools to this massive amount of data. So we can generate many types of RNA molecules with different types of like chemical modifications, this armor in different places, and evaluate what is the cost for the molecule and whether this armor works or not. And but you really need AI, because you really need to assess, like it's so complicated and there's so many options.
Of course, yeah.
So that's like our approach to this idea. Yeah,
it's fascinating. And so you have recently yourself moved to London, and I assume moving a bit of the company to the UK as well. Tell us a bit about, you know, what's happening in the business and just where you're at in your development as an organization.
Yeah, so the company has three sites. The main one is in the UK, in Cambridge, and I travel to Cambridge twice a week. We have roughly 15 scientists over there. It's within Cambridge University. We actually rented a place within the university. We have a very nice agreement with the university, part of the CRUK of Cambridge, and we operate from there. And this is where most of the R&D work is conducted.
Yes.
Most of the molecular biology work, and we have also a site in Israel, and the site in Israel is where the operation and the bioinformatics, the data analysis, the AI, the very strong computational biologists over there. And we have also a small site in the US, where is our chief therapeutic officer, and she resides there. And also we do some of the in vivo work, just because in the UK to do in vivo work is quite complicated. The regulation is quite not simple to deal with here. We do it in the US. And so we raised so far $22 million for the company. That's our seed round. $9 million out of which came from the Gates Foundation.
Right.
And yeah, I also met with Bill Gates
Okay.
on Zoom, presented to him the company, and talked about our vision. It was a fantastic experience. Really exciting. Yeah. So yeah, this is where we are right now, and we are de-risking our platforms and moving forward with what I described, with the idea to raise a Series A within a year or so.
Yeah. Yes, fantastic. And this isn't what this interview is about, but I have to ask. Tell me about your meeting with Bill Gates.
It was great. So the first thing about the meeting was it was like a weekend in Israel. So Israel, like the weekends are Friday and Saturday, and the meeting was like over a weekend. In a weekend that I already scheduled to go with the family to the countryside of Israel, quite a rural place.
Yes.
North part. And I told my wife, listen, I cannot miss this, conversation with Bill Gates. And although we scheduled that already, and she had some families coming from abroad, I should find a way to do it. Now, the thing is, I cannot do it from our bed and breakfast there because the internet sucks. So I had to find like a place, like kind of like a WeWork type of thing, in this rural place, and that's Israel. So it's like always like someone knows someone that knows someone that knows the head of the municipality of some like this like rural place that has the WeWork. And although it was weekend, they opened for me this like place over the weekend, and I went there and presented to Bill Gates, and he was like, very engaged. And you just think about, like this guy probably hears like so many pitches and so many things, right, in general, but he was like super engaged, asking questions and excited about things and asking like the right questions. So this was quite a nice experience.
Yeah, fantastic. Any particularly tricky questions?
Not at all. Not everything was fair and to the point, and things that usually when you practice, you give good talks. That's like 90% already determined before you open your mouth, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. I'll get back to the point in that case. So so look, it's a fascinating project you're working on, and we'll come back to it as we talk through this, I'm sure. What I really wanted to focus on, Yaniv, was your career and your journey to this point. So you mentioned that you're a computer scientist by training. I believe a computational neuroscientist originally.
I did, man. Yeah, undergraduate was basically neuroscience with kind of like some focus on computational aspects.
Right.
But I spent some time at the Israel intelligence. We have mandatory service in Israel, so I served some time over there. And in the intelligence, you learn quite a lot of like street fight math and computer science. Very practical way of learning things. It's less like academic and much more practical. And it's it was a great experience. I entered while I was 18 years old, just out of high school. And your commander is someone that is just like he's older by 2 years than you, direct commander. And you are there, and kind of like in the army, there is like zero resources on one hand, but infinite resources on the other hand. It's kind of like there is no limit. It's just like it's a different than a company.
Yes.
And in a way, you can do almost like I could do whatever I wanted, right? Like it's stuff like you start prove yourself. This unit is very entrepreneur in a way. So you could just learn whatever you just like. There is the opportunity, and you can seize the opportunity. So I worked on like different like crazy stuff, crazy projects, but it really teaches you how to think about real world problems and how to solve them. And solving problems meaning like there are no answers. That's the first net you learn. Like it's not, there are no experts, right? It just nobody knows the answer, and you need to figure out yourself. And it's fine to live in this uncertainty. They also do a very good job in beating out your imposter syndrome.
Okay.
It's someone coming to me and looking in my eyes, right? Remember, I'm 18 years old. He looked at my eyes and told me, listen, I never saw in my life such a failure like you.
Right.
Now it's part of the training, right?
Yes.
And you can take it like it's like really, really harsh. But when you hear it like every day for like a month, you just say, I'm not going to pay attention to it. I'm just going to cut through the noise. It's you just learn. And actually, no, later in life, when you hear the same thing, you just kind of like, but I'm not like going to pay any attention to that. Of course, I know why my worth. They really do that to build your self-confidence. Also, there was a nice thing that my supervisor of this team and another senior person, they were discussing about some problem, and they asked me for my opinion. I was like 4 months right in this team, and I told them, listen, guys, I'm only 4 months here. Like, how should I know if you don't know? And my supervisor took me and he told me, listen, Yaniv, I never want to hear in my life ever again that you tell that you don't know something. You're not less smart than anyone here. You just have less experience, but you must try. And this lesson was really engraved in my brain. That it's a very good process to build, I think, confidence and to build kind of like a sense that you can accomplish whatever you want.
Yes.
So that's how I started my career. Then I moved after this was like, meanwhile, I did my academic studies, studying like neuroscience and some computational neuroscience, moved to the US to do my PhD.
Yes.
And in my PhD, it was in the lab of Greg Hannon that now moved to the UK. He's now the director of the CR UK Cambridge. This is why the company is now in the UK. And Greg is a very special person. He's super smart scientist, but also he's like very, I think, direct and harsh, kind of like, like either you make it or not. And I'm not going to I'm going to throw you to the pool. You better swim. And for me, this was perfect because this exactly, what I got like in the army, and this same thing, right? Like there is no time to whine and self-pityness in a way, right? You just need to get things done. And this was a very good PhD. Like I finished it in 3.5 years. I won this award for national students in the US, for national award for students in the US. And after that, I got my own lab at MIT, at the White Institute. Also a phenomenal program. I was very lucky to be in this program.
Yeah.
Basically get they give you a check, they give you a lab space, they tell you, okay, you have 3 years to basically do something. Good luck. See you in 3 years. Right? And you need to kind of like hire people and train people. And I was like super, super lucky just to find the right people. I found my first hire was a student. She was an undergraduate at that time. And I met her in Israel. It was a hot summer day, like awful day. She came as a visiting student to Israel to the Weizmann Institute for a summer program. And after we met in Tel Aviv, right? And Weizmann Institute is about like 1 hour away south of Tel Aviv. It's in Rehovot. It's a small town. And after that, I thought like after she would meet, we met like in noon. And any normal student would say after like meeting in Tel Aviv, would say, I just spend a day in Tel Aviv, go to the beach. It's like really, really nice. It's like a hot summer day. And I asked her like at the end of the interview, like, so what are your plans for the rest of the day? And she said, I'm going back to the lab. I was like, okay, you accepted. So I was very lucky to hire her. She was brilliant. And also other people joined my group. So I was at MIT, spent there for like basically 5 years. And then moved to Columbia University to be an associate professor of computer science, although I have no formal education in computer science, right? Spent also some time over there. And after 7 years of leading my own group and publishing papers in the top journals, and my first student, this like brilliant undergraduate student, became a PI, became a professor herself.
Right, okay.
And also I won grants from all over many places. I thought as it's only 18, I could I'm going just to die here at the bench, age of 70. That's my life. And I was approaching, 40. I thought, okay, I need to like rethink what I want to do in life and see like what's the next challenge. And I got an offer to join MyHeritage, which is a consumer genomics company and also a genealogy company, and to go back to Israel and build their DNA unit. So all the unit that will be devoted for analyzing data from consumers, trying to tell them things about their pasts, trying to tell them things about their future, like health implications. So I thought, okay, that's quite a challenge, and it's also like very exciting company. So I went back to Israel. My mom was very happy about it because I'm the only child, so she wanted me. So I went back to Israel with the family and everyone else. Spent 4 years with MyHeritage. The company exited, was acquired by Francisco Partners, and so that was the journey. Also, like it was a crazy journey, right? So we worked on this DNA product, and in DNA product, like you need to think about how you collect samples from people, and it involves swabbing of the mouth. And in January 2020, we thought, we have this like apparatus for DNA tests. What would be the next big thing, right? Because we saw DNA, okay, like people take it once in their lifetime, right? They don't take it twice, but you don't need to. What would be the next big thing? And we thought, what, maybe like infectious diseases, STD, right? STD is actually something that people maybe want to be tested in the privacy of their home, and then they send the results and we can analyze. So we started thinking about it. It's kind of like, okay, like that could be interesting. And then we heard there is this like virus in China going on. And I emailed I talked with my CEO there. And he was like, yeah, I don't know if it's like interesting. Maybe it will go away in a month. I have no clue. Like we should not work on that, right? But we kind of like collected quite a lot of knowledge about how to do infectious disease tests, like what's required, qPCR, like how you build a lab like that. And then in March 2020, there was like a time that actually like this thing is not going away so quickly, eventually. And the first thing is like the health authorities in Israel heard that we have swabs because we have swabs for the DNA, and they were about to run out of swabs for their tests, in like COVID tests. And we donated them like swabs, and this is what actually kept this like testing apparatus in Israel afloat for like another like 2 weeks in March, before they started like self-generating like in Israel these swabs. And at that time, it's okay, like that's a thing. We should do something about COVID. I contacted my friends in China. That's asked them. I have some friends in BGI Genomics in China. They're a diagnostic company there. And I said, what do you guys do in China? You have like 3 months ahead of us, so probably you do something different. And they said, oh, we know how to build a testing lab in 1 week, but your Israelis, you're a bit slower than Chinese. Maybe it would take you 3 weeks. But we can guarantee that in 3 weeks, we can make a testing lab in Israel, like with our equipment, and like you're like you do the actual like building the lab. We can give you the layout, how the lab should look like. And we can also, and that was critical, we can promise that you will get priority of swabs of the testing like kits, of also even the protecting equipment that was in shortage. And we pitched it to the Israeli government, and this was like a chaos for 2 weeks, that they said yes and no, and no and yes and yes and no for like, and they couldn't decide. Eventually it was, okay, you should do it. And this was the first time that a private lab in Israel started testing people for part of the public health effort. We have like something like NHS in Israel. It's it's very fantastic program. But this was the first time they allowed a private lab to be part of this.
I see. Okay.
Of this system. So we built this lab in 3 weeks. I have a time-lapse movie, how we took like a space that was just an industrial space. The crazy thing is that we didn't have time. So the constructing workers had to start, they first had to demolish. Now, we didn't even have the final plans. We just don't keep just demolish like everything. So we can just like have a clear canvas to build. And we had really like working 24/7, crazy project, converting like 30,000 square feet space into an operational lab, BSL-2 lab that can handle like COVID tests. This was the largest testing facility it was the largest one in the Middle East for some time.
Wow, okay.
One of the largest labs in the world, and it
Yes.
could speak. It tested 70,000 people a day. The Israeli population is 10 million. So that's like almost like testing, not far away from 1% of the Israeli population within a day. Was a fantastic project. And I think it also helped to convince Pfizer and BioNTech to be like, Israel was the first to receive the vaccine. We vaccinated
I see,
like very rapidly before like the rest of the world, because one part of it was that we have this testing apparatus, so we can now know who is infected and what's the efficacy of the effectiveness of the vaccine.
Yes.
So so that was part kind of like basically like helping with like setting this lab and thinking about to construct it. It's crazy, really crazy period. And after that, like the company also exited, and I started 11 Therapeutics.
Yes. So that was a busy few years for you.
Changing from academia to DNA test to then COVID test, and now 11 Therapeutics.
And it's interesting. How was it going and starting 11 Therapeutics compared to what you expected? Because I suppose through your career, although maybe you hadn't had, I don't know, you may have had some, but although there wasn't sort of formal business entrepreneurial training, the jobs that you've done in some ways sound like they prepared you quite well for that. So in the army and in your postdoc and then into Colombia, you were given a blank canvas to work with, and similarly with the lab that you built.
I didn't do a postdoc, right? I don't have my own lab.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Not PhD. But yeah, I think entrepreneurship can come in different flavors, right? When you build your like own lab in academia, it's also entrepreneurship. You need to find students, you need to be savvy about funding. You lead your own group. You take like from nothing to something, and that's always entrepreneurship. Also in the army, like how to actually convince, like you're like a very young person, 21, 22, and you need to convince very senior people, like to do something, to invest in a project, to invest in a certain like strategic direction, and it happens. Like it's a very good preparation, this unit. So I think all of them prepared me. I think people give entrepreneurship, I think it's like how to operate in uncertainty and taking decisions under like a lot of uncertainty, and where there are no right or wrong answers, or at least like you don't know them when you take the decision. The business side, I think people put too much emphasis on that in a way, right? Business is not like, I think there are certain rules and there are certain things, but in general, it's not super complicated as a thing, right? The biology is more like I can turn a biologist into a good business person if this biologist has some like the biologist wants to learn that. It's very hard to turn a business person into a biologist.
True.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. A lot of it is common sense. I think it's just relentlessly applied common sense in many cases.
Yeah, common sense and being bold, and like that certain like personality, it's traits rather than like knowledge.
Yeah.
Either I think in a way you have it or don't have it, or you can, if you have the foundation that you can develop yourself, right? It's like being like a sprinter. You need to have genes to be like, you have to born with like being a sprinter. I cannot be a sprinter, right?
Sure. No, but you're right. I think a lot of what you need to learn to run a business from a business point of view, you can learn those things, right? They're not overly complex. You can get into a lot of complexity if you run a major corporation. You can do all sorts of things, but to run a business, you can learn that. As you say, it's mostly the psychology, the ability to deal with uncertainty, as you say, the risk tolerance, the boldness, the decisive. It's those sorts of things that
leadership, things that So and also like have fantastic partners with me. So I have like my co-founder that is actually now visiting me from Israel.
Right.
He's a very colorful guy. He's an F-16 co-pilot.
Okay.
And he's an entrepreneur in life science. And he brings also, he helps like with these places where I'm like, lacking. So we are complement each other quite nicely. And we have also our chief therapeutics officer, and she's like fantastic pharma person, spent the past 15 years in pharma thinking about how you develop drugs, how you actually take these like crazy ideas and make them a product. She's very knowledgeable in that, and also like very strong and smart person. So kind of like, you need also to find the right partners. And that's a big difference from academia, right? In academia, you run your own group and you are a one-man show in a way.
Yes.
You have students and you have postdocs, but you're the only leader of this entity. And here in a company, that's what I like. You bring more people with you to the helm to help they kind of like run the ship, basically, so you can scale better. And also another difference is that in academia, people talk about academic freedom. I think, academic freedom is like French fries. It's not really French, right? And it's not really freedom in a way. Yeah, you can pursue whatever problem maybe you want, but there are many things in how you run your own lab that you lack. First, there are very like limited number of titles that you can give to people. You're either a student, a postdoc, and maybe in some cases you can give a staff scientist.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much it. And here in a company, we write our own HR guidelines, right? So we determine how much we want to pay to people. What's the compensation structure? We can also give equity, and all of our employees have equity in the company. They have options. That's important for us. So in academia, you have the HR policies of the university, and in some cases in the UK, especially, this is like 100 years old institutes. They're not going to change so fast just because a new professor came, right? And so you have the ability, like how you do recruitment, how you run your company, the strategy of the company. There are many things that you can do that in academia, it's like, sure, like you can study whatever you want, but all the infrastructure is set
within
for
this framework.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I'm always interested, Yaniv, in the origins of companies. So briefly, just tell us a little bit about, I guess, the genesis of 11, and was this an idea that kind of you'd come across previously, or was it, how did it all start?
Yeah, that's a terrific question. So it started I knew that I wanted, with my heritage, that after like, being a few years there, that, okay, I know diagnostics, I know how to do like, consumer genomics. I want to move to therapeutics. I don't want just to read biology. I want to write biology. I want to change the course of people. And so this was in my mind for some time. Then the pandemic started, and this, like I told you, these 2 weeks that the government told us, you have a lab, you don't have a lab, like I thought, I cannot believe that I'm going to be irrelevant for this pandemic, like this, like once in a lifetime pandemic, and I'm a biologist and I want to do something. So in the meanwhile, kind of like as we like waiting for the government to decide, I started thinking, what should we do about like this pandemic? Can we do can we create any new treatments, like, and not just vaccines and things like that? Now, one thing that I thought is like, why not to use RNA interference? So we talked about mRNA. mRNA is the ability to create a new protein.
Yes.
RNAi is the ability to precisely destroy an mRNA and therefore to inactivate or to destroy the protein. So I thought, what if we create an RNAi molecule to target the SARS-CoV-2 genome? And I contacted my former PhD advisor, Greg, and I told him, Greg is a world expert about RNAi.
Yes.
He discovered some of the key findings in this mechanism. And I told him about this idea, and he said, like, it's a crazy idea, but I love it. Let's do it. And then I found my co-partner, and this was like during lockdowns and everything. And we started kind of like running this idea on the side, right? Like, let's do something about it without even any funding. Like Greg said, okay, I'm going to put 2 students. We'll figure it out. We figured out how to cover the expenses. Let's just do it. And we started. And then kind of like after I set up this or helped to set up this COVID-19 testing lab, I said, okay, that's it. Now let's move on and start 11 Therapeutics properly. We raised some money. Everything was like during lockdowns. And so I saw like my partner, I met him, I think once out like in 6 months for a face-to-face meeting. Everything else was like via Zoom. And it's, it's like, it's a good test for the relationship, right? Like if you can operate this way, then it means that it's meant to be. And I was very lucky that it it's like we survived like this type of relationships, and it's just fantastic. Yeah. So this is how we started the company, and then we raised some money and we de-risk and we show that we can like move forward with the platform. And then the vision kind of like became bigger. We said, okay, like it's about it, because like, okay, we have this molecule against SARS-CoV-2. but I can give it to people, but it will rapidly decay in the body because, as you said, the body hates foreign RNA, right? It would try to degrade it. So we need these chemical modifications. And then, okay, so let's develop a platform for chemical modifications. And suddenly now we're talking about not just RNAi, but also mRNA, that so we can either destroy a protein or we can create a new one. But it's the same kind of like vision of let's change the chemistry of these molecules to make sure that they survive in the body for a very long time. So that's kind of like how the company kind of like pivoted.
Yeah, interesting. And I suppose starting in those circumstances has kind of informed how the company's grown, right? So you've got this group spread across 3 countries, 3 continents.
Yeah.
But you're working together, you've got an aligned mission, you're all pulling in the same direction. And I guess, yeah, if you started the company in 2019, it might have been very different, right?
Very different. We thought, anyhow, like we are at home. So why should I recruit someone in Israel that is maybe like 10 minutes walk from my house, but I cannot see this person and everything be in Zoom, or I can find the best talent in the world wherever they are. That was kind of like the idea. Yeah. But even given that, I think there is still the physical connection, like you need to maintain it to some extent. And this is why I'm here in London. And I'm not in Cambridge, but I'm in London, and I see the team twice a week. And the team here, I think it's like it helps to grow the company and to alleviate some of the concerns of people. People like maybe I'm as like the founder, and also given my experience, can tolerate more uncertainty, right? And tolerate more like some sort of like working alone in isolation. But for some people, it's not always like that. So like, for the team, it's important, I think, to see me like, twice a week at least. And we still try to kind of like we take the company every 6 months for a retreat, everyone, all the sites. We just finished a retreat in Greece like a month ago.
Very nice.
Yeah, it was very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess kind of the middle of the world is kind of your oyster for those retreats with where your stuff are, right?
Yeah. So you go kind of like and you need to be mindful about expenses, but it's like off season in Greece, so it was actually quite okay. The weather was perfect. We were in Athens, like about 45 minutes south of Athens, and on the shore. So yeah, it was very nice. So I think it's kind of like I think as the job market in general is trying to kind of like accommodate to this new reality.
Yes.
Right? Like you like before we started this like conversation, you mentioned that you moved from London because you don't need to live in London, right?
Yeah.
And it's part of it, basically, that this thing that we can live in different places these days, and we can use this amazing technology, right? Like video conferences, high quality video conferences, and also we're more accustomed to this type of interactions, but also to balance with physical interaction. So how do we actually do that? And I think it's the question for the job market for the next decade.
I think that's true, and I don't think anyone knows 100% the answer at the moment. And it's interesting, and I suppose you have an opinion on this, given your initial training, that we have all this technology that's external to us for the vast majority of it. Doesn't mean we can escape our underlying biology and our underlying pathways that we've developed over millions of years, right? And so that's that personal connection. This doesn't quite replace that, right? And it gets us 95% of the way there, but we still need that last little bit from time to time.
For sure, but also think about like one of the most important technologies is the invention of ability to print books at scale, right? Printing, basically.
Yes.
And also, not by the way, another like precursor of that is just writing as another technology. Now think about just these 2 technologies, how they enabled the spread of ideas in the world, right? So, and it's quite similar, right? You can create you can spread religions like using this mechanism. So I think it's like there is some like human can interact. We don't just need physical interactions, but we need also some dimension of physical interactions, I believe.
No, absolutely. And as you say, you can connect more readily, and you can be in the countryside in Israel and be meeting with Bill Gates and
you don't need to fly. People used to fly, for like business meetings. I knew like until 2020 for the important business meeting in the US, the expectation of everyone is that you will fly. You fly for like even like 1 hour meeting.
Yeah.
You will cross like across the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, and the Atlantic Ocean. It's a jet lag from hell. You meet the person just to pay like like their attention, like love and affection, basically, to show that you are serious about this conversation, and you go back and think about the carbon footprint of that like flight.
Yes.
This strain on families and spouses of people who this is their life, and this was my life, basically, and just the waste of time and energy of doing something like that, where actually we can have a quite meaningful conversation, the same one as we do right now over Zoom.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
No, I think it's 100% true. And just finally, Yaniv, you've probably touched on this already, so we may be recapping a little bit here. But thinking about your career and the things that you've learned over your career, if you were talking to someone who was starting out today as a freshly minted PhD or starting their scientific career, or perhaps you were talking to yourself at that point,
Okay.
what do you think you'd tell that person? What do you think you've learned that you would share with them?
I think 3 things. So first, like, go and learn a scientific discipline that is like, it's say well-established scientific discipline. So if you have that, a very smart person, and you think about, should I go to like, I don't know, study like a degree in a business school or go study science, go and do the science. If you're interested in that, right, it's fine to do something else. But if you're interested in the science, because it will give a stronger foundation, you can do the like your MBA, you can do it later on, right, in your career. And maybe actually you come even more seasoned to that MBA, better for you. The second thing is there are going to be many failures, like and maybe setbacks during the road, and they are inevitable, and they're going to feel like shitty, right? They're really going to feel shitty. There is no nice way to put it.
Yeah.
And just like, in a way, I like this, like, like there is like this, like a paradox that you need to kind of like recognize the brutal facts of your reality, but have the belief that you prevail at the end. I really like this one. Just maintain that attitude. Like, don't be delusional, but keep the optimism.
Yes.
And the third thing is find your support and the things that actually will help you during the way. I'm very lucky to have a fantastic partner that she's willing to go with me to different parts of the world and to basically like endure my, like, when I need to fly and then I need to do other things. And also have a fantastic partner in my company, right? Like my co-founders, my C-level. I don't waste energy on meaningless things, such as like, like fights with like that will not get you anywhere.
Yeah.
And I'm very lucky of like, being in this situation. I appreciate that. It's not because I'm smart, I'm lucky, right? Due to these fantastic people around me. So I think to just like think about who are the people in your life and you're going, in your like daily life, but also who you're building your company with, super important.
No, absolutely. You need to find those people who will support your crazy ideas about RNA, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. No, fabulous. Well, Yaniv, you are doing something fascinating, you and your team. I am really keen to see where you get with it. We will be keeping an eye out.
Fantastic.
Good luck.
Thank you very much, Tom. Really appreciate the conversation.
Thanks for joining us on Careers in Discovery, and don't forget to subscribe for more insight into the world of drug discovery and R&D. Do take a look at our sponsors, Singular Talent, and their mission to make hiring better for companies and individuals in drug discovery and R&D. You can find them at www.singulartalent.io. See you next time.